So greetings and welcome again, everyone. My name is Natasha. I'm a volunteer with a Buddhist meditation program in a prison. And I'm here today with members of the Boundless Freedom Project, which is an awesome nonprofit organization. And their mission is lighting a path to freedom by sharing mindfulness, ethics, and compassion practices with people impacted by incarceration. And so our purpose today with this session is to help build Sangha across prison walls, and also to build our community's awareness about the transformation of suffering and the healing that is happening in prisons within Buddhist meditation programs. And so our speakers today are amazing. They're 5 men, Eric, Nhat, Edwin, Robert, and Michael, whose deep practice was forged in prison. And then also a few prison volunteers, Jin and myself, who offer Buddhist programs in prison. And so I just really want to thank all of our speakers for being here today, especially Eric and Nhat for helping me organize this presentation. And I also want to really thank Ayla Benjamin, the Executive Director of Boundless Freedom Project, for helping to guide us. And she'll be speaking in a moment. Also want to thank Dharma teacher Lynn Fine for helping guide this process with me and helping this to manifest. And also Diane Wild, who was the original founder of Boundless Freedom Project and another luminary teacher. So many thanks to all of those people who've made this possible, and to all of you for being here, offering your listening and your support. So that's all that I want to say for now, and I'm going to pass it over to Ayla. Ayla, if you're ready to share a few words before we transition to our speakers. So I'll bow out and thank you, Ayla.
Thank you. Thank you, Natasha, and thank you everyone for welcoming us into your Sangha. I know we are all looking forward to this gathering together. So as Natasha said, we provide in-prison programs in California, as well as in jails and in the communities, and with juveniles. And so you'll get to hear a little bit today about the impact of some of our programs. We have both Buddhist religious services that run inside the prisons, as well as a non-religious mindfulness course that some of the individuals here today helped co-create. And before we dive into our presentation, I wanted to make a note about language. So at Boundless Freedom Project, we strive to use humanizing language, especially in the incarceration system. We hear a lot of language that's dehumanizing. Words like inmates, prisoners, convicts, parolees, criminals, any of that type of language. These are words that dehumanize individuals and detract from their humanity. It also often refers to a temporary state of incarceration instead of the whole essence of who the person is. So we invite and encourage you to use words like brother, sister, Sangha members, incarcerated people, formerly incarcerated people, and just try to be using humanizing language. You'll hear us do that, and we ask that you do the same and consider adopting that as a practice going forward. And so aside from that, again, we're really excited to be connecting with you. You'll hear a little bit more about our programs, and we're going to be very happy to answer any questions you have. And hopefully this will be the start of a great connection between Boundless Freedom Project and this beautiful Sangha. So with that, we'll dive right in, and I will pass it over to my colleague, Eric. I believe you are kicking us off tonight. So I'll pass it over to you, Eric.
Thank you, Ayla. And just for everyone's knowledge, I will be one, speaking first, but also keeping time, because we know we have 5 presenters, and we also want to make sure that we observe that there is enough time for those of you who may have questions upon the end of this. So if I interrupt someone who's speaking after me, please be aware that this has already been discussed and they're aware of that. Some of our conversations and talks can be quite lengthy with regard to the impact that this practice has had on us. And I'll start with my own practice. One of the reasons that I loved Natasha's invitation to do this is because we get a chance to speak about how volunteers have impacted our lives. I was sentenced originally to life without the possibility of parole. And it was with that sentence when I came in contact with one of the volunteers at CSP Solano, California State Prison Solano. I had helped to develop this program with our founder, Diane Wild, while I was on the inside, but I didn't have the knowledge of who was going to be coming in to share and meet with us. But this one particular volunteer, her name was Ellen, mentioned to me how in her daily routine of volunteering in the communities and volunteering in other countries, that she had volunteered in Darfur. And in prison, I had seen some of the atrocities that were happening in Darfur. And she had mentioned how she had volunteered in the Philippines in the jungles, helping women and children who were being kidnapped and mutilated by terrorist groups in the Philippines. And I was sitting here looking at this lady like she was a saint. She was an angel. She was a savior. And all I knew is that I wanted to do what she did. I wanted to serve people who were in need. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know what was going to happen, but it was in that moment, the impact that she gave me, that I knew that my life was changed. I wanted to do so much more and be so much more productive with life. And that was my motivation. And I want to convey that to those of you who are listening, that you have the capacity, volunteers have the capacity to transform lives with the Dharma, because it transformed mine. And with that, I would love to pass it on to Robert and allow him to speak.
Excuse me. No, right now, no tienes una junta importante. No. I'm sorry. Also, hi, good evening. Thank you, Natasha, for inviting me. And after I was sentenced to 25 years to life. In addition to that, I committed another crime in prison, which I was sentenced to another 9 years to life. So pretty much I was sentenced to die in prison. And after years of living a dysfunctional lifestyle, I found I had the desire to make changes in my life, and I did begin to make those changes, and it was difficult. And I finally got the opportunity to go to a level 3 security prison, Ironwood, where I met my fellow friend Edwin, and he's the one that introduced me to meditation. He invited me to the Sangha, and there I began my practice. And then Thich Hanh, he was a volunteer that would go to Ironwood State Prison, and there he would lead us into meditation. And one of the meditations that made an impact on me was the compassion meditation. And in addition to, I remember one time he led us to reach out to our inner child. And I remember in that day going through the meditation and reaching that deep within myself. And I reached out to the little kid that was in the dark room deep down in me. And he was fearful and scared and cold. And I finally reached out to him, and I was able to tell him that it was okay, that things were going to be all right, that he no longer had to be afraid. And that led to me being more in tune with my emotions, with what was going inside my body. And from there, that developed into me starting the healing process, because there was still a lot of trauma within me, and that led to me little by little healing, and from thereafter that my practice evolved, where I became more aware, more in tune, like with my emotions, with my own humanity, and I was able to make those changes in my life where I began to instead of just thinking about myself, and start thinking about others, and being more compassionate and understanding, tolerant towards my brothers, and so yeah, and from there I was able to transform, and finally I was able to go to the to board, and really transmit my change through articulating the things that I had learned, and how I had applied those lessons in my life to make that transformation. And one thing, and meditation was key to me, being aware of what was going on in my head, in my body, and it's just a self-awareness. And I mean, I gotta say that that I continue that practice as a returning citizen. Every morning I meditate, and that keeps me balanced and ready to meet the challenges that that one as a returning citizen have to confront, because there's so much going on. But nonetheless, I face difficult situations. My meditation, helps me to navigate to difficult situations, just by me being self-aware. And that
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
okay. And so meditation has been key to my transformation. And thank you for allowing me to share.
How about Edwin?
You can never make me last, huh, Eric? Just one time, just make me last. No, thank you again. You just saw around the corner now. We're talking about liberation and peace. I literally had to pull over in the worst neighborhood in LA County, and to talk about liberation and peace and safety. And so it's just ironic. Once again, my name is Edwin. Yeah, I've been working with Boundless Freedom for the last 2-3 years now. And Boundless Freedom, I was just a couple steps back. I was incarcerated life, at 16 years old, and I started 24 years. And the first 15 years was full of conformity to prison. I was lost, I was suffering, and there's a moment in life when I just got tired and I wanted more for myself. And I wanted to transform. And part of the transformation was just to honor my victim, the person I've harmed. And the only thing I knew about my victim, that he was Buddhist. So that's why I joined the Sangha. And once I sat in the Sangha, just trying to honor him, just trying to be in his steps, the steps he was walking. I sat there, and the mindfulness and the practices was really liberating. And one of the biggest thing for me is having my past pain doesn't reflect of how I look at life now, the perspective of how I look at today instead of my past pain. And that really helped me with my healing and my transformation. But the one thing that really helped me out was Diane. When Diane came and she sat me and she asked me, it's like, what's wrong? Like, what is the really thing that's bothering you the most? And I told her, the worst thing that bothers me, my biggest shame piece, is the fact that I took a life. I took a life, and there's no way. Every single day, it's hard to just wake up and not feel the shame that I feel for what I done. And she sat me and she talked about karma, and she talked about self-compassion, and she looked at me like I'm a human being. Then for decades, I stopped looking at myself as a human being for what I've done and for the trauma that was inflicted on me when I was young. And Diane, just able to look at me as a human being, I started looking at myself as a human being. And that's when all the self-compassion started really cultivating within me. And because of the self-compassion and because of acknowledging my suffering, I was able to see other people suffering. And so when I was inside prison, and people used to call me baby Buddha, because like, oh, baby Buddha, that's baby Buddha. At first I thought it was the Asian thing, like a fat Asian or whatever, like, hey, you got, but it was more the temperament part, because that self-compassion liberated me. And I'm always there for people. I'm always there for service, because it gives me a purpose, to see other people suffering and want to just relieve the suffering and give them the medicine that what Diane gave me. And to this day, I know I visited prison, I visited juvenile hall. All I want to do is just you know what? I don't have all the answers. I don't have not much, but to sit with you and just look at you. You know what? That you are a human being. That you are enough. Because that's what volunteers did to me. That's what they made me feel. Just the ability to feel like a human being, and not let my past trauma or my past actions really reflect of how I live life. It's not an anchor anymore. I live life with love base. I live life with compassion. I live life with me being empathetic of your suffering, because I myself suffered, and I caused a lot of suffering. So there's many volunteers that came in my life that are from the Sangha, especially Brandy coming over, and she was one of my favorite volunteers. At first we were like, what, you want me to do yoga? You want me to take off my shoes? You want me to do that? Just because they set such a safe container in the maximum security that I was able to be comfortable to take off my shoes and to do the weirdest stance. And to this day I still do yoga, to be just to be transparent, because of the fact that being liberated within myself, I can be safe. I can feel safe. And you know what? Since I was a little kid, I never felt safe until that moment that I was able to sit with the volunteers, because they look at it as a human being, and I'm not my actions.
30 seconds.
See, that was really good time management, because I'm done. All right, Eric.
Thank you. Michael.
Hi, my name is Michael. I was sentenced to 15 years life, and you start off at a higher security level. So when I finally got to a place where I could express my Buddhism and actually be myself, I ran into a volunteer who was there. Now, keep in mind, volunteers are here, but you have to come and meet them. So whatever you get in that small interaction is what you take with you. And what he did, it was real small. He would bring a lighter and light incense. That was a thing for me. I like the incense with my Buddhism. It just helps me calm myself. So again, I was at a lower level. I ran into a volunteer who had the honor and the valor to keep going, even though it probably would have got him in trouble. Or matter of fact, it did get him in trouble. So his name was Jay Paskin. I'm not going to forget him, because 10 years later, when I asked Diane why she doesn't do it in a very diplomatic way, she said that she just doesn't. But it was still a part of Buddhism. It was still a part of Buddhism to the point where Mr. Paskin thought it was good to bring it in and give us the little piece. One piece him, one piece us. And as a volunteer, what you bring in and what you show is impactful. It doesn't matter how small it is. All of us here, it's all about the small things, isn't it? It's never the big things. It's the small things. That's human. And when somebody shows you that they'll get in trouble or go all the way, then you remember that. I did. At that time, I had done about 10 years already. I already knew I was coming to Buddhism, and I didn't need very much to stay. But when he showed me that, he showed me honor and valor, I kept going. I kept going long enough to remember it, to ask Diane. I say Diane because I know Diane a little bit. Her name is actually Diane Wild. I'll never forget her either. I'll never forget Jay Pashkin. And if you go in to talk to somebody, they're not going to forget you. Excuse me, they're not going to forget you. They're not going to forget whatever honor or valor or little things you do for them. So if you're going into a prison, you are a big piece. And let me tell you that, because he was a big piece for me. I haven't forgot it. That was 15 years ago. I haven't forgot Diane. I still call her and wish her happy Mother's Day. I just did. I'm sorry, let me forget my manners. Thank you, Natasha, Eric, and Isla for giving me a chance to speak. I kind of dived right in because you guys know I'm formerly incarcerated and all that good stuff. So I just want to be really focused and say that, you know, if not for the volunteers, I wouldn't have the story and I wouldn't have the steel that Mr. Pashkin and Diane gave me about Buddhism. Yes, I still meditate. Yes, I still remember where I came from and who got me there. But who got me there was a volunteer, not another inmate. I'm sorry, not another incarcerated person, not a guard, not my family. They're all humans. But I remember that one little piece of kindness, that one little steel that Diane re-steeled later on. And it was all a volunteer. I was already going to Buddhism. There was no question about that. I was already incarcerated. There was no question about that. But when you imprint memories, like you do with a child, or you do with someone else as an act of kindness, then okay. But that's who you are as a volunteer. That's what I got from a volunteer. And whatever capacity you bring Buddhism to whoever you bring it to, they're going to remember small things and they're going to remember your honor. I encourage that. I'm glad for it, and I thank Diane for coming in my life many years, about 4 or 5 years ago, and Mr. Pashkin for just lighting incense. You're getting in trouble for me, showing me that I was still worth it. And as a volunteer, you tell the guy who you're sitting next to, sitting across from, next to, or whatever, or come to see every week, that they're honored. I want to get that out there because everybody else seemed to miss it. And my story is a little like Eric's, a little like Nut, a little like a lot of guys. But I remember a volunteer. So if you're just close to being go.
30 seconds.
So thank you again. And to any volunteers, anybody listening, it's worthwhile. Very much worthwhile. It was worthwhile for me.
Thank you, Michael. I like to say that at this point, I saved the best for last because this individual who's about to speak is my brother, very inspirational to me, and I learned a lot from him. So, Nick.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Eric. I'm shocked that I'm last. I was hoping that I would be first. I just, as I listen to Michael, I listen to Robert, in my mind, I like, what can I share? Because it seemed like they all share what I experienced, what I wanted to share. I also looked at the screen and I recognized some of the faces, Natasha, Jeannie, and the screen kind of changed a little bit so I can see all the faces, but those are volunteers that I have the privilege to be in Sangha with. Natasha come to CTF when I was there. And everything Michael say is true. Every time a volunteer come in and left, we go back to our cell and we sit with the experience. We sit with that. And sometimes we sit with it for day on end. And we relive that experience, whatever was taught to us. The experience allow us to, like Edwin say, feel that we are human again. For me personally, for the first part of my incarceration, because of the choices I made and because of my inability to deal with that, because I did not have a deep practice, I learned to avoid it and I learned to camouflage it with many, many other things. So I was essentially disconnected to myself. And so I come to a point where I don't feel like I deserve anything better. And when a volunteer come in and willing to take up their shoe and sit down with you and meditate with you and genuinely just being there with you is empowering, is uplifting. It reminds us of the humanity that we once lost. And during the practice, it allowed us to search for that point in time where we lost that humanity. And just like Edwin explained, when we are able to find that, we are able to find the empathy within ourselves the compassion within ourselves. And then we start to realize the world is not just about us. It's this interconnection that we have with other people, that every action, every deed, every word have a ripple effect. And that, for me, that's the first time in my life when I started to engage with Buddhism, when I started to practice, I realized how powerful I was. Every decision I make had an impact on other people. And I grew up thinking that I was powerless. But volunteer helped empower me to see that within myself, see the value within myself and the capacity I have to benefit other people despite of where I was or what I have done. And yes, like Michael said, till this day, I remember their name. For those that I don't remember name, that I'm bad with name, I remember their character. I remember what they say. We are like a sponge in prison. When you come in, we look at you with glow. I mean, it's a funny thing because I can have a very insightful cellie and he can recite all the sutra, but when a volunteer come in, my attention is to the volunteer. It just maybe because of our feeling of being inside that we went through this process of dehumanization, that we just don't see that much value in ourselves. And even our brother next to us, even if he had that value because he wearing the same blue we do, we didn't give him that much credit. But that's something that we learned later on, that we all have this value. We all have this innate nature of wisdom and compassion. So I hope I reiterate what my brother shared today. I want to thank all the volunteers that have been influential in my life. And I hope that you all would consider volunteering, because you, like my brother say, every little thing that you bring into that space will flourish. And
10 seconds.
Well, I'm glad I'm on time, so thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you, Eric, for saving me last.
Natasha bowing in. Dear friends, brothers, thank you so much for that incredible sharing. I was really moved to tears a few times while I was listening to you and feeling the power of Sangha in prison, the effects that our connections can have with each other, and to restore our compassion for ourselves and for each other. And I wanted to invite Jun Hamamoto, who's here, who is a volunteer, to share with us now. Jun, if you are ready, that would be wonderful. So bowing out.
This is Jun bowing in. I've been a volunteer at San Quentin for over 20 years and about 16 years with Soto Zen Sangha that meets on Sundays. So one memory that really stands out for me was I had been a math teacher with Prison University Project for a number of years, and a couple of my students had noticed that I was wearing what we call an ojuzu, Buddhist prayer beads on my wrist, and invited me to the Sunday Sangha meeting. So I went the first day, and at the time we only had a Buddhist service in the evening. Now we have a study group in the afternoon and Buddhist service. So I went in, and meditation was not my strong point. I had always had a hard time sitting quietly. I had like a pain in my hip, and and my mind was all over the place. But I remember that when the bell was invited and we started sitting, that I was really struck by this amazing feeling of calm in the room. This collective energy of the Sangha really surprised me at how still and beautiful it was. And we were in competition with people walking to Protestant chapel in groups, talking very loud, and the wind, and often the flagpole has some clanging metal against it. So there was that sound, and then that particular night and other nights, we could hear the death row people doing exercises, and they would call out numbers, and it was kind of very military style exercise drill, and quite audible. And my mind is kind of like trying to sit while all of this is going on. But I noticed what really surprised me was the amount of calm in the room from the inside Sangha. It was like this ocean of stillness and calm. And it made me feel just so humbled, and also like, oh my goodness, the incarcerated people in the Sangha have such a deep practice. It was just really remarkable to see the deep practice and the just stillness. You could just feel it in the room, in the air. And over the years, I've had the honor of bringing in several monastics from Thich Nhat Hanh's lineage. And I think every time I've brought a monastic in, they've told me what a deep practice the Sangha has and how impressed they are. So it's been just a real honor for me to be part of the Sangha, and to be able to also be there to witness transformation and watch people grow. Over years, I've seen some beautiful. I've seen some very painful things and painful sharing, but in the long run, some beautiful transformation. And so I'm really deeply, deeply grateful to all those Sangha members, inside and out, over the years. It's been a deeply moving experience for me. Thank you so much. Jun bowing out.
Natasha bowing in. Thank you, Jen. Beautiful sharing. I wanted to share a story from my experience volunteering, but first I wanted to thank my partner Zakaya, who's here as Rev Z, Reverend Zakaya, for helping me to think about a guiding question, a prompt that we then shared with the speakers for today. And it was interesting, kind of an interesting challenge to think of a prompt that would help people hone in on one memory or one experience that really was a turning point or a pivotal moment in our Buddhist practice within prison. So for me, one moment that really stands out is a few years into my volunteering with the Buddhist meditation program. I decided to give a Dharma talk that was more from a personal place than I had been doing. It wasn't just about, concepts. It was more of a vulnerable sharing that was about my feelings about my mom, who was going through a really serious health issue at the time. And we thought it was life-threatening. And so I was having a lot of fear, a lot of grief. And I shared that in the Sangha meeting with our brothers and fellow volunteer in the prison chapel. And I shared how I was using my own practice to work with that struggle around the emotions with my mom. And so in the Dharma sharing time after my talk, I was just amazed at this outpouring of love and care and compassion that came from the men in the group about my mom. A lot of them said they would pray for her. A lot of them shared stories about their own moms and their own challenges and emotions around that. And there were even some very similar stories to my story. And then several of them came up to me afterward and shared one-on-one and kind of confided more deeply. And so there was a lot of tenderness in the Sangha that night, a lot of kindness, open-heartedness, and it felt very different than it had for me before. And I felt like my suffering was really embraced by the Sangha, and also I felt less alone in my struggle with my mom. But it was also pivotal for me as a facilitator of a Sangha, because I hadn't been facilitating Sanghas in general very long at that point. And I realized that when I share from my heart in a more transparent and vulnerable way, that's also grounded in my practice, clearly, using my practice to work with that, then that opens it up for other people to open up that way too. And to me, that's a really beautiful way to facilitate, because it opens that door for us all to bring our hearts together and trust the Sangha to hold us in that and guide us through a transformation process with our suffering. And then also it was pivotal because, being a white woman going into a prison where this whole prison system is shaped by white supremacy and capitalism, and my identity is very different, and my background is very different from most of the people I've met in prison. And so on the outside, we look very different. And with that night in Sangha, I felt in a very physical, palpable way our shared humanity. And, we all have a mom. We all have heartbreak and love about our moms and about family relationships. And so to be able to share that, felt like we're really woven together in a way I hadn't felt before, when the outer identities are so different. And so it was an incredible gift to have that experience. And that's just one of many, many, like Jen said, humbling and practice deepening experiences that I've been able to have volunteering in prison. So I'm just looking at the time, and we're actually a little bit ahead of our planned schedule. So we would like to open it up for questions, but also I wondered if Ayla, if you would like to share anything from your time as a volunteer, if you'd like to take an opportunity to do that, we have time. And if not, then let us know, and then we can move into questions. So thank you.
Thank you. Let me just, okay, so, yeah, what I'll share about, so I'm the executive director of Boundless Freedom Project, and prior to being the executive director, I also was a facilitator for a number of years. So I would go into Salinas Valley State Prison and help facilitate our Buddhist services there. Salinas Valley State Prison is one of the facilities that Nut was part of our Sangha at, and other folks were part of our organization, were facilitating programs there for decades. But I want to share about a recent experience. So, just kind of that power of connectivity through all of these Sanghas and that inner being that we all get to experience. So very recently with our team, we went up to Pelican Bay State Prison, where one of our team members paroled from, where another person on this call, spent a very significant amount of time in solitary confinement, and where another person on this call spent also significant time in solitary confinement. And so for our team, this was, a very charged experience. And we were able to connect with some of the Sangha members who are at Pelican Bay, because they also have a Buddhist service running up there. And part of what was kind of surreal for me was to, meet our Sangha members and how, there's this recognition and knowing, knowing that these are our people and that we're their people. And part of what was so amazing about that experience was, truly being able to convey to them that they're part of this network, that they're part of this much larger Sangha and community. And even though, they may or may not ever meet anybody here on this call, even though they may or may not, ever come across other of our Sangha members or volunteers, but they're part of it and they're here with us, and all of our Sanghas, are connected to us. And so anyway, that was one of my most recent experiences going into a prison and connecting with our Sangha, and just reiterating the interconnectivity that we all have, and how what we do has so much meaning and so much potential to inspire folks and touch folks and help folks find that liberation and safety that so many of us are seeking. So thank you for that. And I think now we can open it up to questions if anyone wants to ask questions of the group.
Natasha, bowing in, just to mention that in terms of asking questions, since there are so many of us here, might be easier if people put their questions in the chat. And I actually see there's already a question, so I'll just read that out loud. And then as speakers can decide who would like to respond. From Edissa, thank you for your question about how to be of service in this type of work and what kind of training is necessary. What kinds of services do volunteers provide? So just briefly, I know that for me, the group that I go in with, we provide facilitation for a weekly Sangha meeting in a men's prison down in Soledad. And actually, we used to go weekly. Right now, we don't have enough volunteers, and so we go twice a month now, which was one of the inspirations for having this presentation today, because a lot of prisons are looking for, prison Buddhist programs are looking for more volunteers. And so we want to let people know the opportunity to be of service in that way and what it means. And maybe I'll turn it over to either Ayla or Eric or someone else to share about more details if you'd like to, what kinds of training is necessary for new volunteers.
Yeah, I can just say a little bit about the training piece. So going into prisons, training is very necessary. That's one of the shifts I think our organization has made over the last couple of years, is kind of increasing the amount of training we're providing. And in part, it's because, it is a very difficult environment to work in. And, a lot of people don't have experience working in incarceration or with incarcerated folks. And so if you're interested in volunteering through Boundless Freedom Project, we would provide you with some of the trainings. Actually, Eric co-created, as well as kind of walk you through the process. There's also additional training that's required from the state of California and a lot of paperwork. So it is a process to be able to go in. But we're, pretty hands-on and involved. And so we would be able to support anyone who's interested in doing that. We also have opportunities that are available for, folks who aren't going into prison. So if you want to support the organization or our correspondence work or our community work, there's also opportunities to do that. And then in terms of facilities, again, we have folks here on this call who are part of jail programs, who are in a variety of prisons, doing mindfulness facilitation, doing Buddhist service facilitation. And so there's a lot of ways to get involved if you want to be of service. And we'll put a link in the chat as well as an email address for anybody who is interested. That's kind of the first way of getting involved with us. Jerome.
Hi, everybody. Very nice to be with you. That was a nice presentation, great presentation. I've been working with the Enneagram Prison Project for the last 3 years. And what I found there is that the recidivism rate is very, very low. And I was wondering how Boundless compares to that, and as far as recidivism. And I also wanted to know what the process is for people like Eric to get out of prison so that they can do this work outside from the outside.
Thank you, Jerome. As far as we know, and we don't keep statistics as far as data on individuals who have gotten out, who've been part of our program, to be able to determine the recidivism rate accurately. All I know is anecdotally, none of us who've been part of the program who have gotten out of prison have returned. And I'm willing to stake a lot on that claim, because what happens is, as Ayla and so many of us have mentioned, individuals like myself, and like what you may have heard from a lot of my brothers here, we grew up in households, communities, situations that were inflicted with a lot of trauma, a lot of suffering. Love and compassion wasn't something that we identified with readily in a way that we felt whole and complete. And what happened for me, and what happened with a lot of us, and what we experienced in connecting with volunteers, is that we found something that was genuine and unlike what we experienced in the past. And that connection has forged with this ongoing connection outside, beyond the walls, that has us all there for one another in a way of support. I just have to make a call and my brothers will be available, and we can talk and we can connect. And so is the case with a lot of the volunteers. The work we had to do to get out was what you've heard here. I think Robert explained it really well. Once you became aware of your own emotional state, your own internal suffering, you were able to recognize how your behaviors were reflective of what that experience was like emotionally, and how you were ultimately using tools that weren't humanizing or respectful of the human nature of others, and ultimately hurting yourself. So once you became aware of a lot of that internally, then you started treating others, even incarcerated, with that sense of humanity. And you wanted them to know that you cared about them as well. And we saw prison is very segregated. And this practice allowed us to see through those color barriers, those racial barriers, and connect with people that didn't just look like me. And then made it accepting of people who were coming in. So there was a lot of really humanizing work that had to be done. And for many of us who served long terms, that was reflected in our appearances in front of parole boards. They witnessed that transformation that Natasha spoke about. It was genuine, it was real. And we were vetted in a way that they recognized that we were ready to return back to society, because we were no longer the people who had caused suffering in the lives of others.
Thank you, Eric. I also just want to add that while we don't currently have statistics about recidivism, and I don't really know enough about the Enneagram Prison Project to compare programs, but we are currently working with the Lab of Economic Opportunities out of the University of Notre Dame to do a research project on our mindfulness programs to get some more data about the efficacy of our programs and the impact it's having on folks. I saw a couple questions in the chat. So I think we talked a little bit about the parole process. Someone also asked if we provide programs for relatives or loved ones of people who are incarcerated. And yes, we do. We have an outside Sangha, we call it, which meets every Thursday night. And the group mirrors a lot of our in-prison programs. It's very much the same type of setup. Nut actually facilitates that meeting every week. And that's a great place for any community members, especially friends, loved ones, people looking for support, formerly incarcerated folks, volunteers, to come practice and, you know, get the experience of being part of a very safe and open community. And then let's see, there were other questions. Is there a way to shadow, observe, co-facilitate with an experienced volunteer? Yeah, we would never put someone who's brand new in by yourself. That just wouldn't happen with us. Anytime if you're a new person going in, you wouldn't be allowed to be on your own anyway. So absolutely there would be some training and support and shadowing work that would happen before anyone would facilitate on their own. And then I see a question here too about immunocompromised, not able to so there are ways to be of service that aren't in person, exactly letters. We have a correspondence-based program that actually is going to be a new round of it's going to be starting up at San Quentin, as well as our outside Sangha. And yeah, so there are definitely ways to be involved, even if you are not able to go physically into the prisons. I see Vivian's comment about clothing. Yes, the prisons are very arbitrary and will love an excuse to, you know, deny someone access to being in the prison. That's part of why we have a lot of training around, you know, how to navigate the system. A lot of that training also has been influenced by folks who have actually lived inside the prisons. So we try to set folks up for success as much as possible. Do you work with young people that are not in adult prisons? Great question. And I don't know if Edwin is still on the line, but Edwin works full-time in the juvenile halls. There he is. Let me add you up there. Edwin, do you want to say a couple words about the work that you're doing with the juveniles?
Hi, yeah. Basically, it's a pilot program inside juvenile hall that people like with my live experience, you know, people that served a lot of time, works full-time shift inside juvenile hall. So it's the first time in California that people in background can work inside juvenile hall, work with the kids. We accompany them, and we are currently talking with administrators. And even though I lost a lot of hair dealing with them, we are in process of introducing mindful presence inside juvenile hall, LA County Juvenile.
Thank you. Let's see, any other questions? Okay, well, we'll put in the link. We already put there's
We got Joanna. We
hey,
have one,
Joanna.
Joanna.
Hi, I had to leave it for a little bit and I've come back. So I heard you mention Enneagram Prison Project. Is there anybody here working with that? In our
Yes,
group?
Jerome, who asked the question, has been going as part of that group.
I
Okay,
haven't
because-
been, Jerome Bellingham, I haven't been in prison with them yet. They really have a strict training program, but I've been
Yes.
contributing to some of the committees that are supporting the Enneagram Prison Project. They
Okay.
have they have projects in Belgium and France, as well as in Minnesota and New York and Chicago, and of course the Bay Area. And they have a program of ambassadors, like people like Eric, that talk about how the Enneagram Prison Project helped them to get out and stay out. So it's a great program.
The reason I'm very interested in it, because the Human Kindness Foundation just put out a book. I think it's called 7 Paths to Freedom. And it's all on Enneagram in prisons. I just received my copy a couple of weeks ago. and it's geared toward people who are on the inside. And so I got so interested in it, and I would like in the next year to delve more into it. And then I found out from one of my students at Elmwood Jail, he's been there quite a long time, but he said a few years ago, there were 40 people that took their program, and it was quite amazing. He had the whole workbook and everything. So I would love to connect with anybody else who is doing that I would like to get into the Enneagram. Thank you.
Natasha, bowing in, I just want to really thank everyone for being here, and what an inspiring session this has been. I also want to say, I know that volunteering in prison is not for everyone. It's, a very unique kind of thing to do, and it calls to certain people, and it may not be for you, but that's okay. We're just planting seeds and wanting to build awareness in our larger Sangha network about what's happening with Buddhist practitioners going into prisons, and how transformative that can be for everyone involved. So if you want to know more, you're welcome to use the email for the Boundless Freedom Project, or you can reach out to me if you want to talk to someone who is volunteering now. And I just really appreciate the generosity of all the people who've spoken here, the Boundless Freedom Project representatives, and all of you for showing up and offering your deep listening and your love and compassion for this work. Is there anything that any of the other speakers would like to say before we close?
It looks like Lynn, did you want to say something?
Yes, in a way, I just wanted to echo what Natasha had said. This is the first presentation I know of quite this kind of transcending the whatever walls there might be through the lived experience sharing over Zoom. And maybe it's, we now have Zoom available in ways that we didn't 3 or 4 years ago, perhaps. And I just wanted to express my gratitude to the Boundless Freedom Project, to Jun, to the men who spoke, to Natasha, and with the hope that this kind of, that the recording can be offered widely, and that this can also perhaps happen once a year or something. So there's lots more to say and a lot of appreciation. Thank you.
Well, we've reached our end time. Thank you all very much. I'll offer a sound of the bell to close and send us all off with much gratitude. May the merits of this practice benefit all beings everywhere and bring peace. Thank you all. Much love.
Thank you so much for this presentation.